Nothing quite like talking into a mic. Alright, a little over 9 months ago, which it really doesn't feel like it, my life would change forever. To really get into it, it really started over a decade ago, but with how much led up to it, we could go on for hours here, and for my Google Docs, this is already quite a long one, so we'll just focus on the night of May 6th and the morning of May 7th, 2020. See, I don't exactly have the best relationship with my parents. I lived with them until I was just over 21, and then I was out. We won't go into specifics just yet. Around 5 o'clock on May 6th, I just had a large breakdown in a fight with my father. Before I went on a walk, I overheard him say some unsavory things about me to my mother, and my mother say even more unsavory things about me. I didn't want to say anything bad, so I just decided to go down the road to the graveyard and the church, besides a horse and a cow farm, just to think. Before I left, though, I had heard those magic words. If you're wondering what those words are, you can infer them from the rest of this. You can do it, I believe in you. That's not the words you want to hear during a pandemic, having no job, no money saved, and just failing out of college. You could say I was down bad, as they say on Twitter nowadays. Anyways, I took an empty notebook, a pen, my phone, headphones, and headed out to process everything. I sat down at the graveyard in that cold evening, which I was surprised at because it was May in Georgia. Normally it's very hot. And wrote down a lot of things I can't remember because I had left that notebook behind. I had no room for it. After writing, I opened Google Docs and found a letter I'd written to my friends at the time explaining what would happen if I suddenly disappeared. I was expecting this to come a lot sooner, in fact, probably 2 or 3 years sooner. I thought after I got back into college I wouldn't have to see that document ever again, but here I was, staring at it, wondering what everyone would think when I would send this out and drop off the face of the earth. But something changed. I wasn't really sure if I wanted to go out like that. I was fully prepared to have nothing and just start wandering on the streets until I could change something, but I would really want to do that. Instead, I started walking again. There was a small dog park down the road that I had gone to previously when I didn't want to see anyone, and it seemed like the perfect spot to start making some phone calls. There was also a gas station down the road that I stopped at, so I grabbed some Black & Milds and something to drink before heading out. There at that park, I struggled a lot with what I was going to say. I walked a few laps around the park just listening to music and forming everything in my head. I had already decided that I wouldn't contact my close friends that were near me because I knew that they would try to convince me to stay and, talk to my parents, all that good stuff, but I knew that wasn't going to happen. I'd messaged 3 roommates that night, one who is my current roommate and 2 of my best friends who both happen to live in Michigan. I won't reveal what exactly was said, but I will say it did help me make a decision. My good friend, as well as my current roommate, decided to buy me a Greyhound ticket and pick me up once I had gotten to their home state. With how many thoughts were into my head, I had never really had the time throughout the entire thing to really process it all. After getting that ticket order and figuring out a way to get to the Marietta, which is where the station was, I had my last Black & Mild and started heading back home for the last time. It was a long walk, so I had time to find out what I really wanted to take with me, because I couldn't bring much, obviously. I had brought as many important documents as I could, as well as some small stuff, like your charger, your phone, that type of stuff. At the request of everyone that I knew, I also somehow fit my massive fucking computer into a large suitcase along with some clothes to cushion it. It took a bunch of nice clothes for interviews and stuff like that. I had one last shower too, and a long one. I believe it was over an hour. Somehow the hot water never gave out. After that, I thought about how I was going to leave. I was absolutely not going to talk to anyone in my family. There's too many reasons to list, but that's not a confrontation I mentally wanted to have. Since I was on the second story, I simply opened the window and lowered everything into the dirt before jumping off and catching the Uber I ordered. Cut up my hands a little bit on the shingles, but it wasn't too bad. I was worried about infection, especially since it was May and COVID was just starting to get really strong, but I did not have any issues. If you're wondering why I didn't just walk out the front door, my parents had also said that I wouldn't be allowed to take anything with me, as it was theirs, even though I had paid for a good majority of it. I arrived at the station close to 3 in the morning. It was a really small station and it was freezing. I believe it was only around 40 degrees, but the wind was blowing really hard that night. The station wasn't open at night, of course, and instead of sitting in that weather, I tried to find some place that would let me crash for a little bit. But of course, due to COVID, no dice. In fact, the only place that was open was a Krispy Kreme, and only with the drive-thru. I actually walked through that Krispy Kreme and got some donuts and a Sprite to keep my energy up and my blood sugar leveled, because I did not eat the previous day. I walked back with that plus my belongings and waited in the cold on a bench until my bus came. I didn't want to keep people up and I desperately wanted some rest, so I tried to get some sleep after talking for a while. The only problem was it was freezing and I didn't have much to keep me warm. Also, the bench had a middle armrest, you know, one of those ones that they don't want homeless people to stay on, so I could not lay down. I just had to rest my head on my suitcase while sitting. I had a wrap that I had on my head, and I stuffed my arms into my shirt to keep my body warm, and as the hours drug on, I slowly accepted I wouldn't be sleeping. I kept thinking that I was going to die on that bench due to lack of energy, nourishment, sleep, and now just the temperature, which I know for some 40 degrees with the wind chill, maybe 35 degrees probably around there isn't that bad, but I had been in Georgia and South Carolina my entire life almost, and that's basically considered negative 20 down there. I obviously wasn't gonna get frostbite or anything, but I guess when you're down bad and you start assuming the worst, those thoughts get into your head. I was actually able to get a couple hours of sleep from around maybe 7 to 9 because the sun had come up and heated everything up a little, but the blistering wind was still there. It was a restless sleep, so it didn't really do anything for me. After waking up, I just sat there and waited. I still had roughly 3 hours before the station opened up. While waiting, a bus came by and dropped off a man. I definitely wasn't in the mood for talking, and I also wasn't energetic enough to tell someone to stop talking to me, and I was terrified. I was carrying a lot of money and items on me, and they were also my only belongings that made me a citizen in the United States of America. And the last thing I needed was to get fucked up and have everything stolen from me. So I got to listen to his story when he came up and started talking to me. Turns out he was an ex-convict and an old junkie. He was actually on his way to see his girlfriend, who he hadn't seen in a while, and she had sent him money while he was in prison. He also had a job interview lined up courtesy of an agency he worked with in the prison that helped about-to-be-free people get back into society. He smoked a few cigarettes while I waited and was talking with him, and even asked to use my phone to call someone. As stupid as an idea it was, I actually let him borrow my phone. Looking back, I never should have done that, but I have a bad habit of trying to see the best in people. Luckily, he did just make the call and hand it back to me, as well as thanked me with a cigarette that I definitely accepted. Eventually, someone else came along, a woman smoking who was recently separated from her boyfriend. She was quite the talker. Apparently, she had a bad drug problem and prostitution problems in the past and was also trying to do better. She was actually on her way to see her daughter, who was estranged from her until she contacted her recently. She had bipolar disorder and had arthritis and a lot of other things, and she definitely had some very noticeable tics. She seemed genuine enough, but definitely overshared with someone who she would only meet for a few short hours. Both of them were heavy smokers, and none of us had cigarettes anymore. We were all broke as well, but I definitely was dressed the nicest of everyone there, so naturally they turned to me for some money to get some Newports or whatever they wanted. I actually did have some cash on me I didn't know I had on my backpack. I'm guessing from the con I went to in 2019. Perhaps I just forgot it was there, I don't know. It was only a 10 though. I gave it to them and told them to get whatever they wanted from the gas station that was across the street. Now I think it's a terrible idea to do that normally, but something was really different with my current situation, obviously. I felt pretty immensely guilty. Here I was, cared for, had a place to go, had a plan for the most part, but I thought the worst situation I was in was the one I was in right now currently, but here were two people who had it way worse than me, yet they weren't quite nearly as down as I was. In fact, they were quite enjoyable people, just rather eccentric, especially that woman. How did my situation compare to either one of these guys, and how did they just not give up? I'm not exactly a religious person anymore. I'm sort of a believer in fate, though, and that's what I think that was, funnily enough, and I still don't know why. I can still picture him to this day in that exact area. I can put myself right there, and even though I don't hardly think about it ever, it's very easy for me to recall. When they came back from getting cigarettes, the station had opened back up. Inside was a vending machine. I bought me and the two other busmates I had a Monster Energy drink while we waited. And I don't even like Monster Energy drinks. They taste like shit. But it was all they had. They didn't have any Red Bulls, which I actually enjoy, which also taste like acid. While I was there, I had to weigh my bags and pay the baggage fee, and from there, I just kind of waited watching TV and reading a book on the Kindle that I had. Once the bus arrived, it was finally time to leave Marietta, city I actually visited fairly often. It'd be the last time I ever saw it, at least for now, I believe. I didn't really care to reminisce. Mary is a shithole. I just wanted to sleep. So I tried unsuccessfully while we made our first stop to Atlanta. Now, if you've never seen Atlanta, it's a terrible place, and this station was the absolute worst. It was dirty as hell, people were coughing and not wearing masks. Generally, it was just a shithole. I was pretty sure I was going to catch COVID there, but I got pretty lucky, I guess. I remember lending someone a wall adapter for their phone, and I didn't get it back, but it was some cheap one from a gas station. I wasn't too torn up about it, and I don't even think I realized until I was like maybe a month after this all happened. The man from before, the first one who I met, was fresh off the prison block, came and found me again and asked me to look up directions for an office that was going to help him stay out of trouble and get his life back on track, which I was more than happy to look up for him, and it wasn't too far. I believe it was like maybe a mile or two down the road. But other than that, I hated every second that I was sitting there waiting for that bus to come. I was so relieved once I did get on, had all my baggage back on it. I was so worried I was going to get on the wrong bus. I kept checking my ticket every so often and the numbers on the buses and just making sure I'd get to the right area. I took a small nap on the bus while listening to music. I had a playlist set up for when I was feeling down. It's a pretty long playlist. Once everyone and their mother stopped asking me for my phone, I was able to enjoy my music and eventually doze off for a little bit. A couple hours later, we stopped in Calhoun, a small town in Tennessee. We stopped at one of those side-by-side fast food places with a gas station attached, and I grabbed myself a burger from McDonald's just to have something. From the gas station, I got a few Red Bulls and some sugary foods just to take on the way. I didn't know what was waiting in Nashville, but I knew it was going to get late by the time we got there, so I wanted to make sure I had something to eat there. For the rest of the ride in Nashville, I drank 2 of those Red Bulls and just relaxed while messaging everyone I knew. After the Nashville bus swap, I had one in Memphis, and it was going to be a very, very late time when we got there. I figured I would just stay up the whole rest of the time, as all my stops up until Little Rock, I had to switch buses. When we finally hit Nashville, it was around 8 Central Time, I believe, so it was super dark outside. This station had a small cafe, and the layover was only an hour, and surprisingly the station was pretty clean, so I felt pretty comfortable there. I'd gotten a call from my oldest friend, and we talked about everything that had happened. I won't go into too much detail because a lot of things were personal, but that call was very tiring and didn't leave me feeling very hopeful at all. Once I got off the phone, my bus was there. I loaded back up, still fearing for my computer's poor internals that were definitely not cushioned at all by the clothing and the hard exterior of that suitcase, and we set off for Memphis. I remember it had rained a decent amount while on the drive, and I almost fell asleep. It was definitely the comfiest time on that bus by far. I mean, the buses weren't terrible. They were generally, for the most part, clean. Some of them didn't smell good, but this one did. For one ride on this one as well, no one asked me to use my phone. The Memphis stop was close to, if not after midnight. I don't exactly remember, but I believe it was after. This layover was going to be a little bit, and the station was closed inside. I was also fairly cold out there. Luckily the bathrooms were open, so I could empty out nothing but Red Bull out of my bladder, and that was pretty nice. Nothing much really happened on this layover. Everyone was pretty tired. We all just wanted to get back on the bus, which, of course, ended up being delayed for a reason they would not tell us. It was held up by about 20 to 13 minutes, I believe, and once we got on, I just wanted to fucking sleep. But, of course, sleep evaded me. I was in for the long haul. I had one small stop in Little Rock for a stretch and bathroom break. Then it was to Fort Smith for my final stop. It was a very uneventful ride, but I stayed up all the way until we got to Fort Smith. I got to witness everyone on the bus waking up to the Arkansas sunrise. I had 3 people picking me up, and they weren't strangers. Of course, we had met online, as well as a con, but that didn't really change anything. When we finally got to Fort Smith, I could physically feel myself starting to shut down. I did not have any food. I had no sleep, the anxiety from public transport was absolutely killing me, and my mind would not shut down. Once I stepped off the bus and sat down waiting for everyone to arrive, I thought a lot about what I was doing. Did I make the right call? Should I have not said anything beyond the streets of Forsyth County in Georgia? Should I have called my extended family first? I didn't know. And there's no way of changing anything now. I was several states away from there now. My ride came about 15 or so minutes after I had gotten off the bus. I was so exhausted I could barely muster the energy to give everyone hugs and help load my suitcase into that car. I hadn't felt that drained since I collapsed after doing a 24-hour stream, and I don't even remember out talking to them in the car about anything in particular. I just really wanted to take a shower and sleep. So that's what I did. It might have been early in the morning, but after getting in and saying hello to our other roommate, I took one of the hottest showers I'd ever had, ate a little bit of food, and then I decided if I wanted to stay up for a little bit, but it was no use. I really needed some sleep. On that day, because it wasn't night when I went to bed, I believe I slept roughly 14 or so hours. It's hard to believe that was almost a year ago. It wasn't easy starting off living as a full-fledged adult with no one to really fall back on. This was my fallback, and I was lucky enough to have it to begin with. There was a lot I didn't know or was just too inexperienced to really understand how it worked. And it could have been dangerous to me financially and definitely mentally. I had to grow up in 4 short months. It's more than I had ever any other time in my life, and that was pretty rough. Even now there's stuff I need to start, need to stop, had to make huge decisions I was never able to or never had to. Don't let anyone ever tell you it's better being an adult than it is a kid or a teenager for that matter, because being an adult is just the fucking worst. Wow, that was a long video. I'm not going to comment on what it's been like since then. There will be plenty of videos of everything that has happened in between. I'd like to think I've done fine for myself, but the surface is rather deceiving. There's a lot I don't share with anyone sans like 3 people for the reason that they're really only like the 3 people who seem to want to know what's going on and can seem to handle the type of stuff that I've been dealing with. I promise that I'm working on something funny and not serious, but it'll take some time. There may be a bunch of videos like this that are in between. I enjoy making these because talking into Audacity and a Google document is way easier than talking to people sometimes. That, as well as my computer definitely needs an upgrade, as I'm unable to run some games now at 60 frames a second, even with most of my settings turned all the way down, and I refuse to record at anything less than 60 frames a second, so. But I don't want to drag this on any longer. Leave your comments or thoughts, or call me a piece of shit in the comments, like or dislike, subscribe, whatever the fuck you feel like. Hope you have a good day or night. Have fun with whatever you're doing. I'll see you later. There ain't nothing in my chest.